Members of the American Postal Workers Union handle more than 165 billion letters and packages a year. That's about 34 million pounds of mail every day. Ever wonder what this costs you as a taxpayer? Millions? Tens of millions? Hundreds of millions? Not a single cent. The United States Postal Service doesn't run on your tax dollars. It's funded solely by stamps and postage. Brought to you by the men and women of the American Postal Workers Union.
You turn on the television or you pick up a newspaper magazine and all the information you see is just controlled by a handful of corporations. So how are you or I or any of us, how can we get our messages out to people? How can you tell people what you care about? You can go on Facebook and compete with hundreds of people who post things that may or may not be true. You can go on Twitter and post things with a handful of characters, because Twitter is really the place for literate people to hang out. Or you could go in with a sandwich board and walk the streets. You could write a letter to the editor. Or, even better, you could go to public access television. Public access serves your community on a first-come, first-served basis. And whether you're rich or poor, doesn't matter. It's first come, first served. Everyone in the community is welcome to come to public access and talk about not only the issues that are important to them, but if you have a poem to recite, a story to tell, a song to sing, just anything at all that's in your mind or heart to tell, you come to public access. Public access in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I'm speaking right now, has been around since 1980, and I've seen it change events in Fayetteville. And the nice thing about public access now in the 21st century is that it's not just on a television channel, but it's also on the internet, so you can reach people around the world. So if you feel frustrated at not being able to talk to people, not being able to get your message out, and you think there's no way to do it, well, take heart, there is. Public access, it's a vital component of our First Amendment rights. So public access, like the man says, use it or lose it.
Hello, I'm Adela Gray, and you are watching Fayetteville Public Access TV.
Hi, with us today is Jacob George. Jacob, how are you?
Good, Richard.
Jacob, you made some headlines lately. You were with dozens of veterans when you returned medals, or I guess threw them over the fence in Chicago in protest of the war.
That's correct.
Now, what was the event? What was going on in Chicago at the time?
Well, basically, there was a NATO summit that was happening in Chicago, and we had tried to contact generals within NATO who would ceremoniously receive our medals at the summit. And they did not respond. They did not want to participate. So we decided to throw them as closely as we could to where the summit was happening.
So why did you want to return your medals?
Well, there's many different reasons. Everyone who returned their medals, every veteran stood up and said something different. But overall, we wanted to challenge the narrative of war, and we are also seeking our own personal healing from the wounds of war.
Yeah. So I guess, and the accounts I've read, there are several dozen of you who did this.
I think there was 44 altogether, and everyone who participated through at least 2 or more. So there was well over 100 medals that were returned.
So, and because you couldn't meet with the generals, you ended up having to throw them over the fence.
Yes, that's correct. Well, we threw them as close to the fence as we could.
Okay.
The police presence also would not let us approach the fence, so we just had to lob them from the stage.
Ah, okay. Now you were on a stage.
There was a tractor trailer
Okay.
stage that was out there, so we stood on that in front of the crowd that followed us to that site.
Okay. Now you're a veteran,
Yes.
and you've served several tours of duty in
Yes.
Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, could you tell us what medals that you had that you threw that you returned?
I returned my Global War on Terrorism medal
Yeah.
and the Expeditionary Medal that is awarded for very similar reasons. And almost everyone that participated returned those. Some returned all. Some returned good conduct medals.
Yeah.
Some returned all kinds of stuff.
So, what was it like? I mean, because this medal's a part of you. I mean, as a soldier, no matter how you feel about the war, this medal is still a part of you. And what was it like for you to separate part of yourself and to sort of and to actually physically throw it is like physically throwing. It's like spiritually a part of yourself back at them. What was it like for you?
It was a very powerful experience. The second someone had mentioned to me, hey, we're considering returning medals at the NATO summits, I felt conflicted immediately.
Yeah.
And I felt conflicted up until the point to where I did it. And even afterwards, right now, I'm still kind of on the fence about it.
Yeah.
But overall, it was a tremendous healing experience. The second it left my hand, like you said, it felt like I had released something.
Yeah.
And I was watching my veteran sisters and brothers go through the same thing, and every time they did it, it looked the same.
Yeah.
And it was very powerful for us to do that together and to do it with each other.
Yeah.
You know, the second it left my hand, I knew I had done something that I needed to do, and I wouldn't have a lot of opportunities to do that in my life. So
Right.
it felt good and it felt right.
Right. How did you come to join the military in the first place?
Well, I grew up, you know, here in Arkansas in the Ouachita Mountains. My dad's a chicken farmer. He works down in the River Valley.
Yeah.
So I spent many days on his farm. Joining the military was a rite of passage into manhood. It was a way to climb the socioeconomic ladder.
Definitely.
It was a way to go to school.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford that, and neither could the family. So, you know, there was a lot of good reasons for me to join.
So how did you end up in Afghanistan?
Well, after 9/11 happened, our unit was going to deploy to Afghanistan. That was about a month after 9/11.
Right.
I was 19, so that was my first tour. And then I returned in the summer of 2002. And then my third was 03 into 04.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about tours of duty, how long are we talking about? A period of time. We talk about tour of duty.
Well, some people will serve over a year.
Yeah.
It all depends on what unit you're with or attached to and what you're doing while you're there.
Right.
So I never did over 8 months while I was there. They were relatively short compared to what regular Army units were doing while they were there.
Yeah. So what kind of thing were you doing in Afghanistan?
For the most part, we were working with Afghans, mostly Uzbek and Tajik, and teaching them Western standards for building things and also blowing things up.
That's a time-honored human tradition, blowing things up.
It is in the military, that's for sure.
No matter what military.
Yeah.
So, how did you like that work?
Well, I actually really enjoyed working with the Afghans.
Yeah.
You know, Afghanistan is a very mountainous country.
Yeah.
Very craggy granite, sharp. It's pretty young.
Yeah.
And it felt nice working with hillbillies in Afghanistan because that's what I closely identify with.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was among hillbilly farmers, and I'm a hillbilly farmer. So that was a lot of fun, and I felt it was just, and I was doing something good. I was, you know, developing relationships with people and doing what I could. I didn't have much malice in my heart.
Right.
So.
At some point, in Afghanistan, you began to feel radicalized, I guess, and that's the only word to describe it, because you joined us, I guess, a sense of patriotism, not only just to get ahead financially, but there was something in Afghanistan. There was obviously something that changed your mind or made you see things in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a series of things that did that, but a most notable experience is the summer of 2002. I had just gotten off the Pakistan border.
Yeah.
And my squad leader had a memo that he was handing around to all of us. And I was watching everyone's face as they were reading it, and it was changing. I was the lowest ranking person, so the last person to get my hands on it. When I read it, it called for the mobilization of 500,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines for impending invasion of Iraq the next spring. And that was heartbreaking to a lot of us. Because again, this was the summer of 2002. We hadn't yet heard the drums of war for Iraq. We were still in Afghanistan.
Right.
So we went home in September. And then we watched our citizenry slowly get talked into going to war, and to a war that had already been decided.
Right.
And that's when I really started to lose my faith in our democratic process, because preferably, if we are a democracy, then we're asked if we want to spend our money and our blood on war. But clearly, in this case, we weren't asked. The decision was made, and then we were made to go along with it.
Yeah, it was like there was no really there was clearly no debate on it. And if you even questioned, it was like you were somehow un-American. Totally.
And, you know, it was reported that the largest assembly in modern history for standing up against war happened at the coming of the Iraq War.
Right.
Millions around this planet stood up and said, "This is wrong."
Right.
And again, we saw that this wasn't a democratic process.
Right.
We saw that this was going to happen regardless of what the people of this planet think.
Yeah, because I mean, it was decided. It was almost like it was decided before we went into Afghanistan.
That could be.
Yeah. It seems a lot of people seem to feel like they seem to see the military as this one big block. They're all big supporters of the war effort. They can't imagine people in the military having any opposition to the war.
Well, I think that's unfortunate that people would see it like that, because there are a lot of people in the military who oppose it, but there's a moral and ethical and a financial dilemma.
Yeah.
A lot of people join, like myself, in what is called the economic draft right now.
Right, yeah.
And if they are to dissent, if they are to speak and challenge the narrative of war, they're going to lose their livelihood. They're going to lose the ability to provide for their family. They're going to lose the health care that they very much need for challenging the narrative. So, you know, there are a lot of people.
Would you get a discharge?
You can get a discharge, and they can make it as painful as possible.
Like a less than honorable discharge?
Well, you could file for conscience objector status, but the process of hazing that happens when you do something like that, and just the process you have to go through altogether is very demeaning. It's very painful. You know, you're guaranteed to be called names. I have quite a few friends who have gone through that.
Yeah.
Through that, some have lost their mind and wound up in jail. Some are still struggling a year later for the status. So, you know, there's a lot of complicated reasons for why people do not speak out right now.
Right. And people are still afraid to speak out. Really.
Totally.
I mean, it's hard. It's heartbreaking that people are still afraid. We talk about Afghanistan, and there was a quote I read online. It was one former soldiers said for every house that was entered, if there wasn't a terrorist inside, there was certainly one when you left.
There's a lot of truth to that, and you know, same thing for every farm that we land on, every crop that we crush. You know, we're definitely radicalizing people over there. One of my experiences over there that was very formative for me was just that. We landed on a farmer's field, ran off the helicopter. We were very heavily armed, and the look on his face to me said terror. And I really had to, you know, question who's the terrorist and what is terrorism.
Now, people don't see that. People see movies. People see movies of a helicopter landing, troops coming in. They don't see anything else. What's that like? What's that like when you come in? What's that like for the soldiers and for the farmer?
Well, as a soldier, you know, I have to be perfectly honest, I was just as scared as that guy.
Yeah.
But I had way more armor and weaponry. So, and people surrounded me with the same thing, and so it's scary for everyone involved. It's definitely not a pleasant thing.
Right.
And I have to say, you know, if someone landed a helicopter on my dad's chicken house and heavily armed men ran out, it's pretty likely that we would pick up weapons and fight back.
Right.
And some of the reasons for this is there was a study done, I can't remember which province it was in Afghanistan, but over 90% of the men in that province did not know what 9/11 was and that 9/11 happened. So they effectively really didn't understand why we were in Afghanistan. So try to imagine being a farmer, not knowing why we're there, not even knowing that we really are there yet in the early days, and then all of a sudden a huge helicopter's landing in your field and people are running everywhere and shooting guns.
So it's, I mean, so after you've left, what kind of shape is the guy's farming?
Well, that's an interesting question. A lot of times they're destroyed and then they're protected. There's a lot of poppy in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, some people refer to it as a narco state. A large chunk of its economy comes from that crop. So if it is in the best interests of whoever is operating in the area within NATO to protect the fields, then negotiations with warlords will take place in order to make payments to rent an area for a base. And the fields around that area will be protected. The U.S. At one point in this war has spoke highly of an eradication campaign in Afghanistan, and which is a complete farce. It's not a good idea for one. What worse idea would there be than to go around the country destroying the #1 crop? Because then you basically have a bunch of unemployed farmers who have nothing to do and who are really upset.
Destroying their only source of income.
Exactly. So that isn't a good idea strategically. And it was never really on the table. It was just thrown out there as kind of a fancy one-liner for this global war on drugs. But the reality is poppy is highly valuable as political capital and everything else in Afghanistan.
What if you're a chicken farmer?
In
what was like your dad? What was like your dad? What if a helicopter land on your? What if your dad was in Afghanistan and some Army helicopter land on his property? Would his farm be protected?
Totally not. You know, there are occasions where people are reimbursed for damages done to property or paid per children that is killed, but that does very little. That doesn't do a whole lot, and even in those cases, people aren't paid enough. And they aren't paid as often as they should be.
Isn't it? I always thought that was sort of gruesome when people are paid for family members who are killed.
Right.
I mean, it's like, how much? Who decides what somebody's worth? I mean, it's sort of like somebody sitting in an office somewhere deciding who's worth what.
Luckily I never had to sit down at the negotiating table with a warlord between families. Because I would have given him billions. I mean, that's just amazing. Now, when you were in Chicago, you were actually, there were other groups in Chicago too, and this did not get a lot of. And I hate to use the words like mainstream media because you sound like some kind of lunatic, conspiracy nut, but. In what you see in the national news, there was like a group called Afghans for Peace.
And can you tell us about Afghans for Peace?
Afghans for Peace is an awesome organization. They had teamed up with us so that we could plan this event in tandem.
Yeah.
And by us, I mean Iraq Veterans Against the War. And there's a handful of Afghan vets within that organization. So we had gotten together with Afghans for Peace and basically said, we're at your service. How do you want to do this?
Yeah.
And let's pull this off. And it was 3 women from Afghans for Peace. They had really great ideas, and we pulled it together, and something really awesome happened for all of us.
Do you remember when in the early days, in the olden days, we would talk a lot about how one of the reasons for the war was to help the women in Afghanistan?
I do. I remember Laura Bush campaigning on it.
Yes.
And one of the most healing things about the ceremony was having 3 Afghan women standing on stage with us, holding an Afghan flag and cheering us on as we returned our medals for the global war on terror. You know, it was quite the challenge to the common narrative that we've had in this country.
You don't think Afghani women are just grateful that we're there?
Well,
I know that. I mean, that's kind of. I know that sounds kind of snarky the way I asked that, but I mean, so why would Afghani women not be grateful that we're there?
Well, I'll have to look at U.S. forces and then dig into that. So there's a mental health crisis in the U.S. military right now, and many other crises as well. 1 in 3 women who are deployed in Afghanistan are sexually assaulted by a fellow service member. 1 in 3.
It's like, and we hear this on the news, we read it in magazines. It's like, and nobody seems to be taking that seriously.
Not at all. To give you an example, when it gets dark outside, while I was over there, if I was on a base with a lot of women or working with women in an area, they would request escorts to the porta potty, just so they could go use the restroom once it was dark outside.
A woman who's an American soldier should not have to request an escort.
No, not at all. So the narrative that we're there to liberate the women and give women's rights is it's laughable given the behavior towards women in the liberating force. Now, I went back last year to work with Afghan youth and the anti-violent non-occupation movement, and they, for the most part, the women in that were happy that the Taliban was gone, but they really want us gone as well.
Right. So that makes you gives you 4 tours of duty in Afghanistan, really.
It does.
So they want the Taliban gone, but they want us gone as well.
Yes.
So what do the women in Afghanistan see for the future? I mean, the ones you know about, the ones you've talked to.
Well, there was one in particular that said something very powerful to me. She helped found the Afghan Women's Skills Development Council, which actually formed while the Taliban was still in control in Afghanistan. So it's a pretty hardcore group of women,
right?
To still be doing that work to this day. And you know, I asked her, what will really make life better for women in Afghanistan? Because that's one of the main reasons I came over and believed in what I was doing. And she got kind of a smile on her face, and she said, Mr. George, do women oppress women in your country? And I said, for the most part, no, I don't really observe that. And she said, it's the same thing in Afghanistan. She said the women do not oppress women in Afghanistan. The men oppress the women. And we have to educate the men. If we really want to build a better future for women in Afghanistan, we have to educate the men. And this is a global issue. This isn't just Afghanistan.
No, I mean, good God, look at America. Look at America today. It's like the men with bad haircuts are out there oppressing women like crazy in the legislatures across this country.
Totally.
It's like we can't. It's like we're having trouble educating the men in America. You know.
Mm-hmm. So she suggested we go to one of their programs. So they go out into these small towns all around Afghanistan, very rural areas, gather up young men, and do these training courses on the civic duties and rights of women in society.
Young Afghani men?
Yes, and they told us to go witness one of these, so we went, we watched, participated in the graduation, and these men were very happy and excited to get this training. They loved it.
That's not what we see on the news. All we see on the news is our men, well, the violence towards women in Afghanistan. That's what we see on the news. We don't see the men who really are grateful or want to work with women.
And that's the majority of them. The problem is this outreach. They have to have the space to do this outreach. Yeah. For example, the building where these men were doing this was bombed by not local Taliban, but just local people who didn't agree with what was going on. Yeah. And I asked one of the men, and he pointed up and down the street, and he says, there's a Kalashnikov in every direction that you look in this country. It would be very easy for all of us to pick up weapons and seek revenge, but we're not going to. Yeah. We're going to keep using this building, and we're going to show them what peace and nonviolence really is by continuing to educate each other and not using violence to fight back. Yeah. So, you know, by the women stepping up and saying, we're going to educate you, they really stimulated nonviolence in that community. And then the men followed. So the women there are doing very powerful work. They just need more space so they can continue to grow. Yeah,
I just wish, it just strikes me as being monstrously hypocritical. I never really believed that we were there to help the women in Afghanistan in the first place. And it's just funny how we've just dropped that narrative altogether. You do a lot of traveling across the country.
That's correct.
And with your group?
The group is A Ride Till the End, or ARTTE, A-R-T-T-E. We started out of Fayetteville, Arkansas on May 1st, 2010. We've covered over 7,000 miles now. A large chunk of that is in the American South. So we've covered quite a bit of ground, gone through a lot of tires.
What do you do? I mean, you ride from town to town, but what do you do?
Well, we're a performance arts collective, first and foremost. So we use our music, our poetry, street theater, whatever we can to challenge the narrative of war. And this is a two-sided coin because on the other side is healing. Right. When we go through this catharsis, tell our story, and people listen, then it helps us heal ourselves. Yeah. And it helps heal the perception of war. So the people who are listening have a new perspective. Yeah. And we have been able to take one more thing out of our pack, so to speak, and it gets a little lighter. Yeah.
I guess it is because I can't imagine because everyone has so much emotional baggage. I mean, when you reach certain stages in your life, everyone has so much emotional baggage. But I can't imagine what it must be like just for you veterans, just with this baggage that you're having to travel around the country with and to try to educate people.
It is. It's tremendously heavy and daunting. And a lot of vets that I work with, and myself included, see a lot of our psychological damage as from carrying around the knowledge and experience that this is an unjust war. Yeah. But how do we talk about it? Yeah. And who do we talk to? Right. And how do we reconcile our own spiritual wounds, and how do we heal those wounds? Right. So, you know, a lot of the frustration and hatred I see, especially when working with veterans, is that they know they did something wrong. Yeah. They just don't know what to do about it.
Right. Is that wrong? Yesterday was Memorial Day. Mm-hmm. And do you have any particular thoughts about yesterday being Memorial, even though this will play several weeks after Memorial Day? Do you have any particular thoughts about yesterday being Memorial Day in terms of what you do?
Well, there was a mother that stood on stage with us, Mary Kirkland, who said a very moving piece. She held a picture of her son who had committed suicide. He's a veteran. He attempted multiple times to do this, sought mental health, was denied, wasn't taken seriously, and finally he took his life. And she stood on the stage and said, the Department of Defense killed my son, not an enemy overseas. And it was very moving. And she went on to say, we need to heal the wounded, honor the dead, stop the wars. Yes. And that was a very powerful statement coming from her. And if if there's one thing I would like to see us do on Memorial Day, it is reflect on the true cost of what has happened,
Yes.
on what's been gained, and on what's been lost. It's heartbreaking for me to see the country not taking Memorial Day seriously, or thinking we can honor the fallen by putting a flower on a grave. And that is important, but it's also important to be critical about what we're doing so there isn't more fallen next year.
It's like we go through the motions. It's like we go through the motions, you get the flag ceremonies, and you get the car sales. And that's what you get, you know?
Totally. Totally, and you know, this was mentioned earlier, what patriotism is, and about being a patriot. You know, being a patriot isn't blindly towing the line of the government or the narrative that you're given. Being a patriot, to the core of what patriotism is in this country, is challenging the narrative of the government and standing up to the government. So, you know, and I hate to throw that around like that, because we are the government, we are the people. But at some point we do have to question what we're being told in order to be patriot.
Oh, why not throw it around? I mean, a lot of people just thinking about the next price of the next iPod. Why not throw it around? You're talking about the woman who talked about the Department of Defense killed her son. We were talking earlier before the show, and we're talking about Chicago. And the VA system in Chicago. And you were telling me, like, in Chicago, it could take up to, what, 500 days to get a claim?
Over 500 days on average to get a claim. Some of the vets I was talking to up there said they knew people who've been waiting over 8 years. And these are people who have serious needs, mental health needs, and physical needs. I was speaking with one vet up there who had told me that, you know, there are many vets who have died waiting for their claim to process, which is completely outrageous.
That's morally obscene. I mean, we do this crap. We go through the crap of honoring our soldiers with the stuff on Facebook and the big newspaper stuff, you know, with the big parades, but we don't really honor them, because if we honored them, we'd really take care of the VA. We really take care of the soldiers.
Totally. You know, that's what Memorial Day should be about, you know, helping veterans get their benefits, helping them put their life back together. You know, we have over 18 veterans commit suicide a day right now in this country, and that rate is climbing. And it's going to get even higher as more and more soldiers, service members altogether, get out of the military. And until we start taking this seriously as a nation, if we truly want to honor our heroes, it's going to go downhill.
And that's not even addressing how many homeless vets there are.
Oh, the homeless population is astronomical. I technically am a homeless veteran, given the lifestyle that I live, and I interact with a lot of homeless veterans. And it's just really hard, because once a vet gets to that point, the mental health that is needed is usually not there. It's hard to reach out for it and ask for it. Social skills start to deteriorate very quickly. So the odds of recovery get lower and lower. I hate to make this sound very grim, because there are many programs that I've come across in this country that operate outside of the VA that help veterans get on their feet and put their life back together. So there is good stuff out there.
There's a lot of good
resources.
stuff out there, but I mean, and obviously there are some just spectacular failures too.
Yeah, there is, and you know, I would say that even the VA, some VAs around the country are awesome. Like the VA system in the Ozarks here is really good. Really, really good. They processed my claim in under 60 days.
That's pretty good. That's compared to 500 days. That's great.
Yeah, when I told some of my friends how quickly it processed down here, then they told me how long it takes to process up there, and I felt kind of bad. So it's, you know, I shouldn't have to feel like I need to keep that to myself, but I do.
No, you shouldn't have to keep it to yourself. I mean, that's a shame, and it's a shame on the system up there, and it's a shame on their legislators for not putting pressure on the VA system. I mean, it's no shame on you. What have the reactions been? Not only to your throwing the medals, but also the reactions to what you do.
For the most part, it's been overwhelmingly positive. The medal ceremony was unanimously positive for the people who attended.
Yeah.
Actually, the only person that screamed something obscene at me all day was a police officer. Everyone else stood hand in hand with us. And I'm sorry that police officer felt that way. And there was a lot of police officers that had tears in their eyes while we were doing this, or they would give us a little thumbs up when we were marching by. So that in no way represented all police officers.
Right.
It was just kind of ironic. It was because we had this group of protesters to our right. They were like, "Hey, we love you guys," and then on our left side there was an officer screaming at us.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you do is educate people, and I guess almost every day is spent educating people, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's educating myself as well. The more I learn about this war, and the more stories and experiences I hear, the more sense that it makes. This is one of the most complicated things I've ever tried to understand in my life. It may be the most complicated thing this generation faces in terms of what it's done to our country, our infrastructure, our financial system, our national treasure, our security infrastructure. All of these things have been dramatically shifted because of what's happened over the past 10 years.
Do you think part of it, because we don't have a national draft anymore, and I don't want to return to the draft, but do you think part of it is because we don't have a national draft, that a lot of people just really are not touched by the war?
Yeah, I think that is very obvious. It's something people don't want to talk about. But you know, during the Vietnam era, there were people defecting and joining the Viet Cong. There were U.S. soldiers who were killing their commanding officers, fragging their officers. You know, there was a huge amount of resistance within the ranks. People producing their own media and publications, anti-war literature. You know, mass sit-ins on bases.
Right.
So.
And stuff that has been lost in the popular culture now.
Oh, totally. And you know, a lot of speculation for why that happened in Vietnam was the draft.
Right.
Because the war was everyone's problem and people were forced to do it against their will. Nowadays, it doesn't touch people like that. So you don't hear about people defecting from the U.S. military and joining the Taliban.
No, this is if you talk about Vietnam now, this is what you hear, that hundreds of people were lined up at airports spitting on returning soldiers.
Right.
This is what you hear about. And that's all you hear about Vietnam.
And it's interesting, you know, there's a documentary called Sir No Sir about GI resistance during the Vietnam era. And one of the people in that documentary had done some serious investigation into that incident. And what he ultimately discovered, that it was a rumor. That incident more than likely didn't even happen. But it was just something that's tossed around and said commonly when people reference that war.
I know, and you can't get people to, and people swear up and down it happened to their father, or it happened to their father's best friend, and you know, I mean, it just, you can't get them, you know. Bigfoot, you know. So, so what are your plans for the immediate future? What are your plans? What's happening in your immediate future?
Well, I came home to Arkansas for a little bit, see some family, to rest and relax. This was a very intense experience, and it requires some reflecting and resting. And then in June, I'll be going to Philadelphia to train with a group called Training for Change, which does social justice and nonviolent training for people like myself, mostly low-income people. It's a month long, and it's train-the-trainer training. So basically, they're training us to train other people to be trainers. So I'll go do that, and then spend most of the rest of the year training people for social justice and nonviolence.
Do you? We were talking about low income. You just brought this up, low income. Do you almost see this as a working class issue?
I see the military, you mean, in this war?
Yeah.
I see it 100% as a labor issue. And, you know, one of the things that really gave the anti-war movement steam in the Vietnam era was the civil rights movement.
Right.
Without the steam from the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement would not have been able to do what it did.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I think the labor movement holds that steam for the anti-war movement because it is largely the working class that is targeted to serve in these wars.
Yeah.
And again, it's the working class who shoulders the bear and the tax that pays for the war. So, you know, the working class, the labor movement is really taking the blunt of this. And whenever these two can come together and form a union, we might see something similar to what we saw back then.
And yet the working class in this country is the one who is least informed about the war.
Oh, of course.
Because the media in this country is doing such a piss poor job of informing them. And so many people don't know where to go for information. So the working class is ill-served by the media and by the government. So they're sort of like trapped in the middle. And so you got the economic draft because they're joining the military because there's nowhere else to go. And they can't even talk about it, really, because they don't know how to talk about it. So a lot of them are just, it's just stark patriotism. And they can't, a lot of my friends who are working class cannot talk about this issue without just bowing up and just talking about how great America is, because they don't know very much about the war and they don't want to know specifics.
And I think that is an overall symptom of what this nation is suffering from. We're very juvenile in our policies and how we deal with conflict.
Right.
Very reactionary and violent, and that's juvenile behavior.
Right.
A mature person opens dialogue. A mature person will sit down to the table and talk about something and try to resolve conflict instead of instigating it. And this projectionist attitude of America, this great, beautiful thing without accountability for what it's really doing, you know, is another symptom of this juvenile consciousness that we have. And I think one of the greatest things we could do as a nation in changing the world is to mature.
Right. And who benefits from an attitude like that? It's not the people who say we're the greatest country in the world. It's people above them who are profiting from it.
Totally.
They're the ones profiting from it.
And in the end, those people don't even benefit from it.
Yeah.
You know, they're not growing from this.
No.
And ultimately, their soul's going to suffer for those decisions as well. So no one really benefits from what we're doing right now.
No. I found an interesting quote from you online because I Google, which, as I've said before, Googling is our new form of stalking. You found you had another word to describe the war on terrorism, and you said that word is shame.
Yeah, that's right. When I stood up to return my medals, I said I have one word to describe this global war on terrorism declaration, and that word is shame. And I feel a great deal of shame in the aftermath of war about what I did and not knowing any better. And I've forgiven myself for that. But again, that doesn't mean I don't feel that shame, because I consider myself a warrior.
Yeah.
And I have a warrior's heart, you know, and what I've learned is a warrior has empathic understanding with the enemy. A warrior doesn't hate the enemy.
Right.
A warrior feels grief at the very thought of harming the enemy. And ultimately, my warrior heart was taken advantage of. And my brothers and sisters were taken advantage of as well. And that's terrible.
Yeah.
There's no more sacred contract than the contract to protect and serve.
Yeah.
And for that to be taken advantage of is shameful and heartbreaking.
A lot of people find it hard to believe that soldiers feel this way, that soldiers have this sort of emotional upheaval in their lives, because they just want to see everybody sort of like Charlie Sheen or Chuck Norris.
Right.
You know, tour of duty type. But you deal with a lot of former soldiers, too, who go through this sort of emotional catharsis, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's shattering, you know. This is a crucial step that I see a lot of very brave veterans take in the peace and anti-war movement, and that is being able to say, this isn't just something that the government did and I participated in, this is okay, but being able to say, I take full responsibility for my actions, I'm accountable for what happened, and I'm ready to do something about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, crossing that line is very healing, but it's also very, very painful.
Yeah.
And it can cause, as you say, some emotional upheaval. to suddenly take full responsibility for war.
I guess it's kind of scary too, isn't it, inside?
It is. It shatters your own self-image, your worldview. You know, a lot of things will fall apart if you take that responsibility, but it provides the fertile ground for rebirth. So.
Right. So, I want to talk about something else before we go. You're a singer and songwriter as well. Mm-hmm. And you have some stuff on YouTube. What are your songs about? What are your...
Well, kind of the core of the music that we do on A Ride Till the End are military cadences, which are things that we sing as we march or run in formation. Yeah. And we church those up a little bit, turn them into bluegrass songs, so that we can go into all kinds of different venues and play them, give people a little insight into kind of the psychology in the military and what we scream out loud as we march around together. Yeah. And some of them are stark, some of them are funny, but it's nice to show people, you know, some of the chanting that is involved. And also, you know, when we do this publicly, often there's vets, and they know those songs. Yeah. And they are more than happy to sing them with us because it takes us back to a very special place.
Yeah. Is there part of you that misses being in the military?
Oh, totally, totally. I was paid to jump out of airplanes, which is something I would have done.
Cool.
I would have done that for free.
Yeah.
You know, and I loved it. I loved the camaraderie. I loved everyone working for a common goal. Yeah. I loved being paid to go camp and train and run around in the woods. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I had to look at what all this is for and what we're being used for, and I had to back away from it. But I very much love it. I loved it. Okay. And now I feel like I'm living the life again on my bicycle doing this work.
Okay. Well, Jacob, after the credits run, we're going to hear some of your music. So I want to thank you very much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you, Richard.
All right. I want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Oh, I don't know why I left, but I know that I was wrong, and it won't be long till I get on back home. But I got a letter in the mail. It said go to war, go to jail, and it won't be long till I get on back home. But I used to wear my faded jeans. Now I wear my army greens, and it won't be long till I get on back home. They slapped me down in a barber chair, spun me around, I had no hair. And it won't be long till I get on back home. Well, I used to be a high school stud. Now I'm marching in the mud. It won't be long till I get on back home. Well, I used to date a beauty queen, and now I love my M16. It won't be long till I get on back home. Well, mama, mama, don't you cry. Your little boy ain't gonna die. It won't be long till I get on back home. Hip high. No, I don't know why I left, but I know that I was wrong.
Hello, I'm Adela Gray, and you are watching Fayetteville Public Access TV.
Members of the American Postal Workers Union handle more than 165 billion letters and packages a year. That's about 34 million pounds of mail every day. Ever wonder what this costs you as a taxpayer? Millions? Tens of millions? Hundreds of millions? Not a single cent. The United States Postal Service doesn't run on your tax dollars. It's funded solely by stamps and postage. Brought to you by the men and women of the American Postal Workers Union.
This last song we're going to do, I think you will all be able to relate to. We try to do some music that can kind of bring anybody into it. Some of the stuff we do, some people are kind of like, oh, no, I don't care about that. I don't care about that topic. But this song, really, I don't know how anybody could not care about it. And it is in a foreign language, so I will be interpreting. Ready? Probably not going to have a lot of extra rules. Come on, I'm not very much extra rules. We'll back up here now. On a bit of a leash here. Joan's not used to it. Didn't mean to get personal. She doesn't know where they come from. She sweeps, but the next day, there they are. All over the house. Dust balls. Maybe she's sweeping the other side. She doesn't like it. On the floor. Under the bed. Dust balls like that. It's a drag. She removes them. But the next night, there they are. Dust balls. She can't cope. It's not her fault. She's a good housekeeper. She's honest. She's clean. She's American. She's American. Always fighting the dust balls. But she loses. Like a strawberry tart? What does that mean? She doesn't know. She sweeps.
song's called A Back Porch Boogie. Well, I was sitting out on the back porch, picking with my brother Bill. I said, you know, I love the boogie woogie, and I probably always will. Sometimes we played on the front porch for the whole wide world to see. But when we come round back, it's a natural fact. It's a back porch boogie for me. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Well, you know I'm gonna let my hair down. I can even kick off of my shoes. Just a little bit of that back porch boogie will chase away all my blues. I got Brother Bill's bass on the backbeat, trombone playing on the drums. You know that feel when we all get together. It's a boogie woogie son of a gun. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Well, now at the scene from out of nowhere, there's people dancing in the yard. Ken and Andy playing the guitar, Dr. Blues blowing on the harp. All our friends and neighbors start to gather round. Seems everybody wants to get a little closer to the back porch boogie woogie sound. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Oh, back porch boogie. Back porch boogie. Yeah, the back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long. Oh, the back porch boogie, you can boogie woogie all night long.